Welcome to Mindset U Podcast, your source of mindset education. We aim to provide you with free, valuable education for you to thrive. Enjoy. After coming face to face with death and coming out on the other side with a broken back, pelvis, head trauma, and all the post-traumatic stress that you can imagine, how does one find hope? Karen shares her ongoing journey on the final installment, episode 4 of The Resilient Therapist.
There's a book called The Sweet Spot, which talks about like growth. It has a whole chapter dedicated to post-traumatic growth, right? Where it's the concept of experiencing something that is traumatizing, right? And we know about post-traumatic stress disorder, in which we go through an experience, and now this experience negatively impacts us moving forward. But post-traumatic growth is same premise, except it impacts us in what we call a positive way, in a positive outlook towards life. And the key factor is about the sweet spot, right? Always finding the sweet spot of the edge that is allowing you to grow and develop, where you're not going past that edge and you're, in a sense, hurting yourself, right? Or causing more hurtful impact or outcomes. And you're also not too shallow from that, where you're not seeing any growth, any development. So it's kind of like that.
In the education world, it's called the proximal development zone. In the learning world, it's that. And I'm sure in like the therapy world, there's some terminology called for that. I know Dr. Huberman talks about it, where it's like recovering from the emotional kind of trauma. Yeah. Like starting to accept that, or what he calls extinguishing, and then creating the new experiences, which is like you got to have to push the boundary to create this new identity. And there's a sweet spot to that. Like if you go too far and you force it, you can ruin everything. But if you don't do jack shit, like you're not improving, you're not growing.
I mean, that's true in
everything.
When you're trying to, improve your fitness level, if you don't push enough, like hardly anything will happen. If you push too hard, you might get injured or, do some damage, but the sweet spot.
Is a range that allows for adaptation to occur, which actually circles back to an aspect of your story that I would like you to talk about, which is the times when you had to learn to stay in that sweet spot, where you wanted to push a little bit beyond, where I know it was more so in the mental recovery aspect that occurred in.
I think it's a recognition for myself that, again, I might look a certain way. My appearance is not really changed, but there's an acknowledgement that a lot of things changed as a result of this, and it's difficult at times for me to really embrace that. So sometimes I get frustrated with myself that I'm not like better, that things are still a work in progress, that I need to be patient with myself, that the healing process doesn't always go in a straight line. That's both emotionally and physically. And when I have what I perceive as setbacks, I struggle with that, because it can feel to me like a sense of hopelessness. I don't know if I'm going to ever be 100%, or am I going to get past this? There's still a lot of uncertainty.
So where in your recovery did that happen?
Well, they're current tense, not just past tense. If I have back pain, I always have some discomfort that I've learned to tolerate, but there are some days or portions of the day where I don't necessarily know why, but in more pain than I've gotten accustomed to, and that affects my mood, because like I feel like, oh, like here it is again, like you can't do whatever it is that you wanted to do. It can happen like I'm emptying my dishwasher or something like that, and then it just sort of like shocks me in a way, because I want to think of myself as functional and healed and I mostly am, but there are times where I'm not. And then in terms of the mental health part of this, the emotional self, I experienced post-traumatic stress. And I don't want to say it's a disorder. That's what happens when you go through something. It's really mind-changing. And I'm a work in progress. I function, but there's been times where I get triggered, and it could be I'm driving and I think somebody's going to hit me from behind in my car, or I'm cycling quite a bit and very, very hyper vigilant about cars, and sometimes a car gets close and I get really scared, I'll say terrified, because that feeling of, there's danger involved with everything, but that feels really terrifying to me.
Then there's the other side of that coin that I'm sure exists, because didn't you just climb one of the hardest kind of bike rides?
I did, but there were hardly any cars.
So you get a dishwasher, you get a pain, and everything goes to crap. But then you go and you ride a huge mountain, and Karen is this.
I climbed Whiteface Mountain in the Adirondacks. It's, I think, anywhere between 7 and 8 miles up, and that was a goal that I had set for myself, and I did better than I thought in terms of my pace.
And that's a year after the accident.
Yes.
So I'm just pointing out
no,
is that real in terms of the way we think about it, and I'm bringing it back to your clients, right? Of how your clients come to you and they just want this fix, this solution, right? And I'm sure you're going in and out of those states of I just want the fix, right? I just want the result.
Yes.
But then you kind of go back to yourself in the process, and then it's just you're going in and out. This duality of, I guess, an identity change, no?
Yes, and one that was unwanted, and still grappling with how to incorporate that into myself. There's a need for me to express this and talk about it, but another part of me just wants to and that's what I was doing in the beginning, I want to denial. I want to pretend that it did not happen.
So if you were to give one piece of advice to somebody who goes through a similar traumatic event, right? What would you tell them after this?
I would tell them that there's a lot of pain involved, but there is the prospect of having life restored, and just to really not lose hope.
And with what you just said, it's not just something similar to this with any challenge, really.
Mm-hmm.
That base principle applies across all realms of life. A hope, right? You said that the hardest part about this is those moments when you feel like you lose hope.
Yes.
So recognizing the strength of hope in your story, where, like you said, this is a chapter of your life that's still being written.
Yes.
And that whole still being written means that there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of unknowns that are happening. There's a lot of stuff that you didn't even talk about today when it comes to your own therapy, that you had to go through this, and the things that you had to do to overcome kind of those mind obstacles. But having that openness that you talked about, of trying new things, of not thinking that you have it figured out, and having that openness attached to hope, that's the key factor here. I think that your story really delivers.
I would like it to deliver that, about being open and really not losing hope, even when it feels or seems like impossible.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the key things you did to grab onto hope in moments when you felt like you were losing it?
Simple things, but actually writing stuff down, journal, connecting with positive people, having outlets for just being able to talk about things. Being outdoors is really helpful for me. I sometimes, like first thing in the morning, just looking at the sky and feeling this is going to be okay. It's like there's a much bigger picture here and you're going to be okay. So I think some of the self-focus is necessary, but it also can be a negative. So sometimes I needed to literally expand my horizon and not focus so much on my pain.
It's funny because like what I'm hearing is like hope almost derives from pain. I mean, I think
Gang.
I think that's where it starts for most people,
Mm-hmm.
like where you start to like understand the concept of hope. Right? It's like it comes from pain. But I think to develop it like as a skill, because I think it's something that drives the human forward,
Yes.
right? To do it in the good moments, it's a really hard thing to bring hope out when everything is great.
Well, you don't need it.
You don't, yeah, it's not a need,
Yeah.
but it's almost like if you're able to like pull that out at any given time, like here's my tool. I want to change my life. You know, I want
Yeah.
this new thing. Like, I'll just take this hope out, right? But I feel like at the rudimentary, the binary level of like hope, like where it derives from, typically shows up when there's an extreme amount of pain.
I think you're right.
So then going back to that pain, right, where you talked about earlier on how the physical training, the exercises, that aspect kind of trained you up to manage yourself in pain. Basically, you were practicing, you were, like you said, when everything's going well, like there's no need for hope. So how do you make sure that everything's not going well in a controlled fashion? Go exercise.
You beat the crap out of yourself. Yeah.
It's not a bad skill set to develop, and if that's a way to do it, why not? You're going to benefit in pretty much every way.
I mean, yeah, that makes so much sense because when you're exhausted, like you're looking for the end. You're looking for
Right,
that
and when you
feeling.
think you can't go on anymore, and then you prove it to yourself that I actually can,
It's like, yes.
it's a reinforced
Yeah.
like concept. Like, oh, I was able to. Like when I saw that mountain was pretty high, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but then I was like, just go a little bit at a time and find your rhythm, and don't stop till you get to the top. And that's what I told myself, and it was painful.
That's awesome. Karen, first I want to thank you for sharing your story. I think it's very powerful, and it has, I think, can benefit a lot for a lot of people who are going through similar experiences, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. So I want to thank you for sharing your story. And
For being vulnerable and,
Exactly.
and sharing these moments of fear, of trauma with everyone. So to turn that into a question, like, why would you want to share this?
On a personal level, it feels part of my healing process, and if I can, I don't want to say inspire, if I can reach someone through my story and it can help them, that is something that would be really important for me. And just to be a resource for other people, because I think this is something that also, even more than ever, I'm aware of. The power of connecting with other humans is really, it's a real thing, and we need that.
And if somebody wanted to connect with you, where would they find you?
Right over here. I can give my contact information. I would be that would be awesome for me if I could, anyone that would like to speak with me about this.
All right.
You want me to give my information?
Well, I mean, yeah, website,
Website,
email.
okay, my email is my first name, which is Karen, Karen, with a dot after it, and my last name, Ouriel, @gmail. That would be the best way to get in touch.
All right. Beautiful.
Awesome. So Karen, we heard your story coming from a person who was inspired to help other people, who was inspired to take on her fitness to multiple levels, and because of her own mental health, really live a life that is not really a common thing, and how a moment almost took all of that away from you, but your sheer will and mindset made sure that you were able to bring that part of your reality back to you, where now you're talking about like going up 7 miles in a mountain. And there was another thing about that you recently did that you got like, I forgot, what was it? First or second place. What was that?
I had some personal records this year on a challenging course that I've done before.
Yeah. So personal records, meaning that even before surgery, you beat those records.
Correct.
So like the story of resilience, basically resilience and focus and mindset of development and growth and expansion. So thank you so much for spending the time with us.
I really
and sharing it.
Value the fact that you guys asked me to do this, and I appreciate it.
What does your health, love life, spirituality, career, finances all have in common? Your mindset. Mindset is the source of creating change. To learn how to install these and other life-transforming concepts, browse through our free collection of courses at betheproject.com.